Hey friends, welcome to another episode of Systematic Ecology. Here we are, another episode of What's New, and we're going to do things a little differently this go around because, man, there's been a convergence in the force, and we don't need to talk about anything of what's new except the finale of the Acolyte. And I'll have a confession. I confess right here, growing up as a Lutheran, growing up in the liturgical tradition, I just might be an acolyte. Yeah, and not a dark force wielder or learning under a Sith. What I mean by that is that I lit candles in church as a teenager, and still now, when we don't have people sign up to be an acolyte in my church right now, sometimes I, the pastor of Holy Trinity Lutheran Church, need to light the candles on the altar, because if the candles aren't lit on the altar, how can we have worship? How is Jesus present? That's a debate for another time, but welcome to another episode. Man, I'm really excited about this. I'm with some fellow Star Wars fans, hosts here of Systematic Ecology. We are Star Wars nerds and fans from way back when. And when we have new Star Wars content, we have to talk about it. John and I talked about it the beginning in the first couple episodes together, and how this show started, how the season started. And we were like, we're going to wait to the end to give our final verdict of what we think about this Star Wars content. And here we are. The finale happened. We're here to talk about it. And so I'm here with Christian and John and yours truly, Will Rose, who might be an acolyte. I don't know. We'll see if that's a classification or identity I identify with or not. But welcome to another episode of Systematic Ecology. Let's talk about Star Wars, the Acolyte, y'all. Oh, there's that seismic charge. Right off the gate. All right, Christian and John, we're not gonna bury the lead. We're not gonna wait to the very end to rate the show and give our hot takes. We're gonna start off hot. All right, we're gonna start off like a kyber crystal that's turned to the dark side, that's bled red. Let's talk about our initial. Oh, and there goes my light in my office because I haven't moved for a while. Yeah, that thing. I don't know if it'll turn back on or not.
Gotta wave around now.
I know. Hold on, folks. Here we go.
Wacky wavy, inflatable wheel.
When I talked about the kyber crystal turning red and dark, that's when my lights went out. I don't know if that's a sign from the dark side of the force or not. It's a premonition. It was a force vision. It was a force vision, John. All right, John. All right, we're gonna go from the beginning. Here we go. All right, if we're talking this, I think this show was a lot about attachments, right? So it leaned into what we already kind of were dealing with in the prequels, and what Luke was dealing with, and future shows after the Skywalker saga about attachments. Now, no attachments. If you have no attachments to the prequels, the original series, the Clone Wars animation, if you're just watching this TV show, The Acolyte, on its own, and you try to detach yourself from all their Star Wars, what would you give in terms of rating and thoughts about this particular TV show on its own?
I would say I would give it, not attached to the rest of the Star Wars universe, it'd probably be an 8, because if you take it,
okay,
it's almost like taking it as a work of fan fiction, but more so if it's just its own thing and none of the other stuff existed. It's still a compelling, interesting story. Lots of cool duels with these laser swords, and you get to see a lot of unique, like, High Republic stuff that I guess you would have to appreciate some of the deeper lore in order to appreciate some of the more stylistic choices that they have. But either way, there's a lot of cool action, some compelling characters, and plot twists. So it's pretty good.
All right. I like that, John. Coming out positive, light side of the force. You're going to give it an 8 with no attachments. You're going to, Go down the road of just a story on its own, and that's what I tried to go into this TV show with no attachments. I don't know if I succeed or not, but yeah, Christian, it's your turn. Without attachments, story on its own, how it told its story from beginning to end. What are you giving the show? What are your thoughts and feelings? Search your feelings, Christian. See, search whatever you when you go into the cave, you're going to bring with you whatever you bring with you. So
Yes. Completely separate from any other Star Wars canon, as its own thing, its own beast. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10 at best.
Oh, okay, 6.
I think its own story, like divorcing myself from Star Wars and just thinking this is its own thing. I have issues with characters. I have issues with some of the settings, some of the build up for the plot, but not everything. And in fact, there were some pretty good things in here. We'll get to that later. But like Divorce from Star Wars, 6 out of 10. I have a very different score if it is attached to Star Wars.
Okay, so is that a passing grade, like in GPA?
Yes, anything above a 5
okay,
for me is a passing score.
Whew, okay, good.
10-point scale.
10-point scale. Yeah, I survived going through school with C's and B's and barely getting by with that GPA. So yeah, I am going to give this a 7, right between you guys. We have an 8, we have a 6, I'm a 7 with no attachments. There are some really cool moments. I like the story that it's telling on its own in this particular era, even though I have problems with this particular era of Star Wars. We'll get to attachments later, but if I try to divorce myself of attachments and go down that road of devotion to the Force, these characters and their motivations and the heartfelt trying to do the right thing, trying to find belonging, try to understand this mystic religion, but also attached to a system and a structure in politics and those kinds of things. I'm intrigued by the story, and I like these characters, and so I'm going to give it a 7 with no attachments on its own. I told myself I was going to come in with no attachments, do my best just to watch the show as its own, because I'll confess the High Republic era has fallen flat for me in terms of what Disney has put out there with their novels and comics. I've wanted to get into it, but hasn't been really a lot of characters and Jedis that I'm like, oh, I can't wait to follow this story and keep going. So I just haven't paid a lot of attention to it. So when they said they're going to do a TV show in the High Republic era, which is 500 years before the prequels and the Skywalker saga, and then this particular show is 100 years before the prequels, the High Republic era, I was like, all right, I'll just go in and see what they're trying to say. How is this going to build to the larger story? But I'm just going to listen on its own. And so as a whole, without attachments, I'm like, okay, they did it right. But it's similar feelings to how I felt with the novels and comic books that I've tried to read in this particular era. Christian, you have some thoughts on High Republic era?
Yeah, I've also attempted to get into it multiple times. I've attempted to do the books, I've attempted to do the comic books, and just nothing has really clicked to me.
Yeah.
It just feels like a story that didn't need to be told then, but I know there's a ton of people out there who really enjoy it. So I don't want to be the negative, Nancy on this one. In that regard, it's just apparently just not for me.
Yeah, you have the original trilogy, you have the prequel trilogy, you have the expanded universe, a lot of books, a lot of novels. Some of those books are really good. People love them. Some of them are just threw it out there, spaghetti at the wall. I mean, let's not pretend that like everybody loved everything that George Lucas did and expanding universe like worked everything. Was like people, it's not without its critics when it comes to that. And when Disney come along, they were like, yep, we embrace these particular things. The expanding universe is legend. And they wanted to do their own storytelling, divorced from like the Skywalker legacy characters. And so we're going to do High Republic hundreds of years before and put out these stories about the Jedi and the religion and those kinds of things. And for some people, they love them. For me, it hasn't been the best, or there's other things I want to pay attention to rather than that. So like, cool, do your thing. I'll catch up later. So this particular TV show, I was like, all right, if you want to do this particular era and the timeline of Star Wars, then I'll roll up a chair and get my popcorn out and see what happens. And so that's what I did. And that's what, John, did you dive into the High Republic stuff or have any experience with that? And is perfect okay if you say no?
The experience I have has been through Jedi Survivor on the PS5, and
okay,
it's been pretty fabulous for me. I'm really intriguing, especially with the Dark Jedi. Well, he wasn't a Dark Jedi, but he kind of basically turned dark as soon as they awakened him. I'm trying to remember his name. Dagan Gera, is that right?
That sounds right.
He was like in a back the tank, and the game is set during the kind of the rise of the Empire, and he uncovers a Jedi from the High Republic who was put in the back the tank for like 100 years or 200 years or something, and you get a lot of flashbacks to the High Republic era, and that's kind of been my experience with the High Republic. And a lot of the temples that they visit in the game are from the High Republic, and they're really, really cool, almost dwarf-like in the way that they're designed. If you've played Skyrim, it's kind of like the Dwemer, but it's really interesting design choices, and the flashbacks kind of flesh out a little bit of what the High Republic was about. So that's kind of been my experience, and it's only been pretty intriguing to me. I like the stylistic choices.
Yeah. And again, like, I want to feel like I'm in the Star Wars universe, and there are moments I really felt like I was in the Star Wars universe. They did their best to, I think, other than just like, you can't just make particular sounds or say, I have a bad feeling about this, and then like, oh, then that's Star Wars. I think there's a certain aesthetic and tone and conversations around the light side and dark side of the part of this particular galaxy, and I feel like the show did that. It's not without its editing and storytelling flaws and certain characters that I like or not like, and I scratch my head about some choices when it comes to the finale and what's happening. But I will say that I felt like I was in the Star Wars universe, and I was ready to do that. All right, just changing tones just a little bit. All right, if we're going to rate the show with attachments, we know how it ties into the larger Star Wars universe, the original trilogy, the prequels, the Sith, how it leads up to the High Council of the Jedis and Yoda and all those things. After watching this finale, what would we say? How would we rate this show with attachments and how it connects to the larger universe? Christian, you go first.
2 out of 10. I was
2 out of 10.
Not very happy with what happened. I said maybe I'll give it a 3 out of 10, maybe a 2.5. So nope, 2. For reference, a 1 for me is like a Star Trek Discovery, and a -1 out of 10 is The Last Jedi. So that is my rating scale.
Yeah. All right, so it's above The Last Jedi. At least it has that going for it. In terms of how the larger universe of how it goes for the Jedi and its religion, the High Council. There's some things there that were a little disappointing. Do you care to expand just a little bit on that, on why such a low rating?
I didn't know if you wanted me to save that for later.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just, it's hard for me not to go there right now. Briefly.
Okay.
But I'm curious.
Briefly, Osha and May are some of the weakest characters we've ever had for our main characters here. The way they treat Jedi is like, yes, I am one of those people. Yes, you do need to look at the Jedi as an organization and deconstruct them to an extent because there's things that need to be done. Don't actively hate them with your writing, because that's what I saw through this whole thing. Timeline issues with characters being there who weren't supposed to be there a little earlier than they should be there. Apprentices that really shouldn't kind of exist because of who should be the apprentices right now. Not really big on that. The whole divided beings thing with Osha and May, didn't really care for that either. The witch cult in general was like, if I was supposed to feel sympathy for these people, you have failed utterly. These are nothing but villains to me. So when they died, I was like, well, kind of what happens to bad guys.
Yeah. Okay. All right. There you go. All right, John. Where are you at? Where do you rate this with attachments?
Not as bad of a rating as Christians, if it's on a scale of 1 to like 10 to Last Jedi. But I give it a 6 out of 10. Attaching it to the Star Wars universe, it does go down a few points. I kind of liked the idea that they were going for with like the Vergence and the Force. It kind of reminds me of again in like was it the Last Jedi or the ninth movie where they were doing the dyad and the Force was like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's a cool concept, but they cannot execute it to save their life. Like they have a great idea, but they cannot pull through with it. And I was like, oh, the Vergence and the Force, that's a great idea. It almost reminds me of harmonic convergence in The Legend of Korra, where they had which was a well executed idea where like the spirit world converged with the human world and it affected the human world in crazy ways. And this was kind of like in that vein where like the Vergence and the Force, like where something happens and it creates life. But what they should have done is explore a little bit more on how the witch cult managed to access that and create a Vergence, which is what I think they were going for. And they didn't explore on how they detected the Vergence and the Force, which would means they would have had some type of equipment which measures like, I don't know, the M count, like an electromagnetic meter, but it's an M count meter or something. They would have had detected it. There's a lot of questions that I had that didn't go answered. And I liked Osha and May's characters, but I feel like the ending was almost like a cop-out where they like reversed roles, where Osha was, sticking to her guns and she was kind of the good girl the whole time. And then suddenly she's the bad girl. And then May's kind of the good girl. And you're just like, what's going on with that? And May gets like a reset and she's like, who am I? And I wasn't a big fan of the ending. And also I'm going to mirror some of the complaints that Christian had, which is like, characters showing up a little bit before they should have. Was it Jedi Master Ki-Adi-Mundi showing up? And I guess he was younger, but it just didn't make a whole lot of sense. It would have made a whole lot more sense to just have Yoda present throughout the series, even if he's just in the background, because he was definitely alive and well then, and a big presence. He's even a big presence in that little cartoon show that they have. Was it Young Jedi Adventures or whatever? Right. But I guess my biggest complaint was just how overpowered they made the villain and how weak that the Jedi seemed to be. And I did kind of get the hint that they hated the Jedi, like the writers of the show. Like it seemed like they just didn't have a high opinion of the Jedi, and they just made them look like these dirtbags, almost like, when people have negative depictions of cops. That's kind of how I got the show.
Yeah, they definitely play with that and kind of the zeitgeist of the day in terms of authority systems, authority structures.
I just didn't like the attitude they had towards the Jedi, because the Jedi are the good guys. Like the prequel era, I feel like is the high point of the view of like the Jedi, where like they're these heroes. They're kind of like these the knights that come in and they save the day, or they turn the tide of these battles, and they're like the epitome paragon good guys. And then you come to the High Republic, and this is where they're supposedly coming from or coming off of. Right. And they just seem to be morally dubious at best. And they're kind of more like the Galactic Police.
Oh, they definitely leaned into that. Christian, I saw you shaking your head. Is there something, or like waving your pen? Is there some things there you want to follow up real fast, or just like echo?
The whole Osha and May switching sides, I called that from episode 1. And that's not necessarily going to be a bad thing if you call that a twist from the beginning. It's how you execute it I have an issue with. It just felt like they were passively in that story of being like, well, the writing says that I have to be on the other side. Ergo, at the end of the series, we are going to be on the opposing sides. I was not happy with that. And I agree with John's assessment about their view of the Jedi as being an evil force, pretty much, in the galaxy. Versus, and the High Republic was supposed to be the height of their power. That's kind of like the ideal behind this part of the continuity. And this is where we're starting to see some of the cracks. And I'm not opposed to seeing the cracks, because they have to end up where they are in episode 1, where they're a bit too dogmatic for their own good. They're not as active as they should be. They're not asking the questions they should be. I'm not opposed to that, but this is a poor way of introducing that concept. It's like if you started, what's what I'm looking for here? It's like if you started off with the worst possible thing leading up to how things got really bad. instead of like gradually getting there over time.
Yeah. Yeah, I will say, without attachments, would I give it a 7? Is that what I said? I think with
It's
attachments, I'm right in the middle with a 5. I see what they were trying to say. I see what they were trying to do. I think they had, oh, man, with this finale, I've shared it, off air and other places. I feel like with episode 8, we either needed 9 and 10 to flesh out some of this more, or have this particular episode a little earlier in the season so that we can expand a little bit. I see what they're trying to do because they wanted a season 2. They're planting some Easter eggs. You have Darth Plagueis. You have the back of Yoda's head. You have cracks in the armor of what's going on with this cover up with the Jedi. But I feel like it needed more story to tell because it wasn't necessarily guaranteed a season 2. I don't know if we're going to get a season 2 because of fandom, because of budgets, because of what's going on. I don't know if this is going to be completed in a novel or a comic book. We'll see. But for me, attached to the larger universe, I'm all for Jedi. This particular Jedi seemed to be more concerned about their rules and the rules they follow rather than people. And this whole idea of attachments of, I think that's what Anakin was wrestling with. I think that's what Qui-Gon was talking about. Eventually get to Luke, who is like, yep, I love my friends, and it's my love for my father, and the good I see in him is going to lead to the redemption of all things and balance to the Force. This idea of like no attachments, or we're going to focus on the rules rather than people. That's where you get problematic. And you see that in this particular show, that whether it's the space cops, or they're not space priests, they're not space religious priests who are bringing goodwill and force to others. They're enforcing laws, and not that there's bad things about law, but I think if you lose the fact that people are important rather than the rules, then that's where you get in trouble. And I think that's what Jesus was about when it comes to his particular colleagues in ministry and religion, that he had some pushback, the religious establishment. I think you see that here. And Soul was trying to get to that, but there at the end, whether that was executed at the end, I don't know. But in terms of attaching to the larger universe and eventually getting to Palpatine underneath the Sith, Darth Plagueis, and where that's going, I'll give it a 5 because I wanted to see more. I want to see more story being told, but they spent too much time in other areas rather than the main thing. So anyway, that's kind of where I am. That's why I wanted to have this conversation around attachments and non-attachments, because I think, man, Star Wars fandom brings a lot of the weight of expectations of its fandom when it comes to nostalgia and the expectations of the fan base and what their story they're trying to tell. It's just weighted down so much, and it's so hard to get away from that. I just want Star Wars needed a home run, and they needed a good story to kind of bring the fan base together. And I don't know if they're just tone deaf at Star Wars or what, but it's just this was not the home run that the fan base needed. There's some good moments. I loved the conversation around the dark and light and Quimir and attachments and love and what we long for. But in terms of this particular story, I just don't know how we'll get to that. And what's next for Star Wars. We'll get to the State of the Union here at the end. As a whole, what do you think this story was trying to tell? After seeing the finale, I do like that it was a longer finale. I think they tied up some loose ends. There were some Easter eggs there. I wish we had episode 9 and 10 to wrap this thing up and have a standalone story, but they want to keep teasing out more TV shows. But what story was this show trying to tell? John, we'll let you go first, then Christian, then I'll play cleanup.
I think the story, quote unquote, that the show is trying to tell is that the Jedi are scumbags, and it almost tries to make the Sith look good, especially the dialogue. And actually, it was good dialogue. All the best dialogue was from the villain, and a lot of the best acting was from the villain. And it almost made himself sound justified against the Jedi. And I feel like that's kind of what it sounds like the show's trying to do. Is it's like, all right, well, down with the Jedi. And even Osha at the end, killed the best character, best character on the Jedi side, which was Master Soul, who was kind of like the Qui-Gon father figure, and tried to make him look out to be a dirtbag when I don't even think it was his fault. You know, his Osha's mom turned into like this crazy like darkness, almost like a bunch of bats, you know, and it turned into like this dark creature, and he's like, oh, stab, you know what I mean? Like
after possessing his Wookiee Jedi friend and mind raping the young apprentice who just wanted to go home. These are people we're supposed to feel bad when they die.
Yeah.
Sorry, John. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just like, I don't know. Anyway, I just felt like it was just trying to paint a negative picture of the Jedi. And congratulations, you did. But what cost? And also, is that even what you're supposed to be doing at this point in the High Republic? Like, if you want to, I feel like, I don't know. I just feel like it didn't go the way that it should have gone.
Right. Christian, what story they're trying to tell?
Yeah, I'll agree with John. I think this is supposed to be the portrayal of like the beginning of the end of the Jedi Order being the paragons of peacekeeping they're supposed to be. In that by the time we get to episode 1, they're as stagnant as they are. There is what's what I'm looking for here. There is not as focused is the wrong word. It's just that as stringent as they are. There's as tough on the rules as they are. Instead of caring about the people they're supposed to be caring about, you know, looking over the Republic like they're supposed to be looking at. And this, in their point of view, is a case against the Jedi that they went off and this crazy kooky cult out here that is messing with things they shouldn't be messing with. And then when you see what looks like from the outside perspective, like potential child abuse, they try and step in and they make the wrong call based on the limited information they have, but then they try and make them out as villains for something that's not really their fault. So I have huge issues with that because I think their story is that, hey, when it comes to light and dark, it's so easy for you to go from one to the other, and you got to be careful about that. But it's done in such a hand-fisted way, I really can't get behind what they're trying to say.
I think that what they were trying to tell is a kind of this beginning story, origin story of Darth Plagueis leading up to Palpatine, leading up to the Jedi being losing sight of their religion and their place in the universe and the power that they've been entrusted with, and losing sight. So this cover up, this not allowing others to use the Force the way they see fit, was a way that helped lead them down the road of being blinded of this Sith being able to penetrate and pull the wool over their eyes and eventually overturn the universe. So I think that's the story it was trying to say. And I think even the writers and the creators have said it'd be interesting to see from the Sith point of view, how they understand the Force and be a little bit more sympathetic of the Sith. And I think the show did that. I think it shared that story. I guess what I had a problem with is some of the execution of like I want to see the Jedi as heroes, not necessarily as corrupt cops in the universe. And I know that's reality in our world. I won't go as far as John said, push back a little bit and say, I don't know if they were like, Jedi are scumbag, we're just going to put them scumbag. I think they were trying to show some nuance there, but I think the pushback from the fandom and from like the original fans from the original trilogy is that like, man, this world needs heroes right now. And so there's so much nuance and like everybody's gray and there's no good or bad. And we're just like all trying to figure out the world. I would like to see some heroes in our Star Wars universe, and that's from me, from where I stand, from wherever I am and in my position and age and privilege or whatever. But I think they're trying to get at that. Here's the break in the armor when it comes to the Jedi religion, and they told that story, looking through the eyes of these kids. Whether the execution, the clunkiness of the editing and storytelling, and the choices they made. Whether it worked or not, some of it did, some of it didn't. But man, I'm a huge Manny fan, the guy from The Good Place and his premiere and The Dark Side and those Jedi. We'll get to what we like and what we don't like in the series. But man, those lightsaber duels and Force Foo was just fan freaking tastic, and I loved it. Like I can have a problem with the story, but if you show me a good Jedi lightsaber fight, then okay, I love it. But Yeah, so that's kind of where I am, and I do think like this. There's a subtext also of some skepticism shot towards the Jedi on a political front of like unchecked power, and we're skeptical towards your power and how are you using it and abusing it. And I understand from that point of view in our world that where in this day and age where we want to be look at that with a critical eye and dissect that a little bit, this kind of deconstruction, reconstruction of power and who wields it. I did hear on another podcast. I love Rebel Force Radio, and they talked about it a little bit. Um, they made the connection. I mean, and the fact that Disney owns X-Men and X-Men 97 was a success and coming out of it. You have these Jedi who are almost seen like mutants. And if they're not kept in check or if they're not registered, then we have a problem. So this government, Senate, political entity looking at them doing a investigation against the Jedi and whether they're using their power in a right way or not. I'm like, oh boy, that sounds like of geekdom and fandom. What do you guys think about Jedi as being seen as almost like mutants or been given a gift, and they're looking at them skeptical that they could abuse this on other people, unchecked power?
I think it's a cop-out storyline, to be honest. I feel like they could have done so much more with the Jedi. Instead, they're kind of, it does sound like they're borrowing ideas because they don't have any new ideas, and they don't want to use the non-canonized ideas that were really good. So they decided they're just going to do, space cops and no focus on the religion at all, which was a lot of the point of Rebels. That's why Rebels succeeded so much, is because it treated the Force as a mysterious, almost like the all-knowing entity, like you connect more with the Force, then you're going to be more like a high priest, and you'll be more powerful. You'll be more like the Qui-Gon if you follow the Force versus, all the Force users in that universe just kind of use it at will. And there's no more, like, the morality is dubious at best.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point. Christian?
Yeah, I think this whole idea is just ridiculous to me on the premise, because you're telling me in a republic that has lasted for thousands of years, even after what happened with Darth Bane, it's been 1,000 years. There's never been an organization where the Jedi and the Republic have said, "Hey, we're going to have this third party, watch over us and see what we're doing." That's a story problem. That you literally chose not to include that. You could have added a character whose job it was in the series would have been that figure. Like, hey, I'm here to investigate these claims. This is my actual job, as our liaison between the Senate and the Jedi, so we can figure out what's going on here. And you could have a lot of intrigue and mystery brought into a series based on a character like that, of how he or she is being misled by Master Vernestra, I think her name is, and how, like, hey, he's doing his job. It's not his fault that other Jedi are leading him around the way, but other Jedi are doing their job over here. So it's not the Jedi's fault, it's these select people. So I guess sorry, what was the original question? I got myself angry.
Right. Or just that understanding of like almost the Jedi being analogous to like mutants in the X-Men universe as like as with a skeptical eye, critical eye of like, I don't know if we trust you because you could read our minds and do a Jedi mind trick on us, and you have unchecked power, and we don't know if we trust you or not. This distrust of the Jedi.
That is a great question, because it needs to be asked in a universe where a good Force power, quote unquote, is the Jedi. Goodness gracious, mind trick. That's a good power. That's the good guys using that power. You can lean weak-minded. Who qualifies as weak-minded? Are senators weak-minded? Could a Jedi use that on one of them? How do we prevent something like that from happening?
Yeah,
that's something that needs to be in place, because if you have people with these extra normal abilities, as much as I hate it in my core, I just want to be that idealist. As I've said multiple times over, I don't want to have there be a superhero registration act or a mutant registration act or a Jedi registration act. But being that I live in the world in reality, if I know someone out there can control people's minds, well, what things do I have in place to make sure they can't do that to the wrong people? How to make sure they don't do it to the Supreme Chancellor or the president or what have you? That's something that needs to be in place. That makes perfect sense to me.
Yeah. And I think this particular show, it wanted to be a lot of things with 8 episodes. It started as a murder mystery, and then you kind of solved it right at the beginning, and then you lean into like the dark side Sith thing, and now you lead into like political Jedi tension, Andor kind of stuff. I think it tried to be all things to a lot of themes, and like stick to one, like the murder mystery at the beginning, and then play that out. Or are we going to like really get into the nuance of the Jedi religion and other Force wielders, Force cults out in the universe, this whole misunderstanding, the flashbacks, where the flashbacks were put in the episodes, and then go back to the normal. I think there's a better way to tell it. I'm not a story writer or director, so I can't say I could do better with those things, but I think there's some editing and story choices that I'm like, man, it would have flowed better this way. Or if you just stuck to one particular point you're trying to make, it would have made it a little bit better, or be a little bit more clear of what you're trying to do. So overall, that's why we're like right there in the middle. I'm at a 5 and a 7. You guys are like 8, 7/6, maybe 2, because we're all over the place. And I think this kind of distrust, this stories of distrust of the Jedi is, we got to be careful with that in terms of the fandom. I understand the nuance of picking apart abusive religion. I'm there. I understand that abusive power systems, government, or even the police force. So like there's a place to think through those with a critical eye or critical voice, because there are a lot of people who feel marginalized and oppressed by that. But I think the way to tell that story, Star Wars as a whole needed a home run, and they have. There's a lot of the fan base that doesn't trust, Kathleen Kennedy and others, and not that you have to placate to all things, but it just seemed like if you're gonna double down on telling a story of picking apart and deconstructing Jedi, that's what you're gonna do, and you think you're gonna bring the fan base around the corner for that. I don't know. I don't understand that choice. But hey, I had fun because there was a red lightsaber that had a dagger in it, and he took it out and double stabbed somebody that I made a Jedi shish kebab. Jedi shish kebab. That was fun.
Yeah, all the lightsaber battles were pretty well done. I really enjoyed them. Even the Jedi food thing. I wish that they'd really doubled down on that and had more like a hidden tiger crouching dragon. I got it backwards, didn't I?
Yeah, but that's okay. That's right.
But
yeah, we know what you meant.
Yeah, I'm with you. Well, let's get into the nitty-gritty a little bit. Let's go back and forth. What did you like, and then what did you like? Well, let's go around the horn. What did you like? If you had to pick out, and somebody said, "Man, you're a Star Wars fan. What did you like about the show?" John, what did you like? Quick hit.
What I like, I mean, I thought especially with the villain, I thought the villain had great dialogue. I mean, he was a great actor. I really like Jedi Master Soul. It brought like kind of a Qui-Gon feel to it, and I was just like, those are kind of my 2 favorite characters. And I thought Osha was doing a pretty good job until the very forced last episode. And I also liked a lot of the first 2 episodes had some great story choices, I think, because I thought they were going to cop out and she was going to access her force powers and everything was going to go her way, but it didn't. Instead, they locked her in a cell. She couldn't get out. She actually crashed in the ship. And a lot of things didn't go her way, and I actually appreciated that from a writing standpoint. I was like, oh, good. She actually had some adversity and had to like kind of think on the fly. And a lot of the nuancy things, like the little details in the background. I liked the little armchair droids; those are pretty cool. I liked Pip.
Come on,
Pip the droid. That was pretty cool. I like the little weird birds with on the rocks in that last planet. You know what I'm talking about? That was cool little things. Those little details. That was what I appreciated.
Star Wars universe, cool. Yeah, Christian, what are a couple things you really like?
I'll second the lightsaber battles. The duels in this series were fantastic. That's where the money went into it. I really enjoyed them. It showed at that point just how the Jedi had gotten a little soft. They hadn't had anyone to challenge their authority for a bit. So when a Sith comes out, he wrecks house. And that was a tremendously great scene as well. I love that this is for most people, this is going to be their introduction to something like cortosis, which has been something that's been in the comics and the video games for decades before this, and it gives there's something out there that actually can counteract lightsabers. Like, yes, you kind of need that in a series to not nerf your characters, but like give them a challenge. I'm glad it's in the show. That worked really well. And the Khmer, love him. He was
Yeah.
fantastic as our villain. He was perfect as seduction, a little too physical on the seduction in certain parts. I'm not real big on that, but we're focusing on the positives right now. And and as well, like his whole philosophy of the abuse he went through, and you find out he used to be Vernestra's apprentice, and she's the
Yeah.
one who whipped him in the back. So like, there's definitely some darkness inside
Maybe.
her
I wish
heart
they'd tell more
too.
of that story. We could have
Yeah,
seen that in episode 9 and 10, but no, they're going to
yep,
save that for
yep.
another thing. Yep.
We got to wait for that one though. Let's see, what else was there? There's something else I'm forgetting about. Now, if
Well,
it comes
I'll
back
share
to
mine.
it
We'll
comes
flip
back to
back
me.
around. Like I will say, like, man, Jedi Wookiee, come on. I'm all about it. When they pet him, you saw him possessed and going at it. Like, come on,
Mm.
Jedi Wookiee. I was like, where are we going to see Jedi Wookiee? I don't want to see him with a metal detector. I want to see him go crazy with a lightsaber. And eventually we got that. So that was cool. I will also say, yeah, I like Quamir. I like the understanding of this kind of nuance of the Sith and the how to use the force. I want to be a Jedi. I look up to them and all those things. I love those conversations and the nuance of how to understand the force because as clergy, as someone with faith, I like to think about light side, dark side. And this whole man, when she turned her lightsaber from blue to red because of the hate, because of the anger, I thought that was a really cool moment to see that on screen because man, how yeah, I use the analogy all the time. Which wolf are you going to feed? The one of anger or the one of love? You know, and so the force. What are you going to feed? What are you going to feed your kyber crystal? Right? All right, Christian. What's your lightsaber color? Are you going to bleed it? Are you going to corrupt it? Are you going to lean into your anger and hate and fear and turn it red? Or are you going to let that thing? I think you're probably a green lightsaber guy, aren't you? Because you're Luke. You're Luke. Is
Oh,
that
of
what you
course.
mean?
That's my main one. But if when I actually play like KOTOR 2 and all that, I typically go either silver or cyan because green is a little mainstream. Even though, like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much, if I used one, it'd be green.
Yeah, yeah. But that scene, but that nuance of her turn to the dark side because of her disappointment and soul not being open and honest and sharing the story from the beginning was, man, how many times of our relationships, because we procrastinated telling the truth and not being open and honest with something that eventually is going to come back and bite us or not or damage relationship more than it was. Be open and honest and authentic relationships, and that's what like corrupted that kyber crystal and lightsaber. So yeah, red lightsaber, red dagger. The force foo, I loved all those things. I loved what was the other thing? Man, final episode we had a space we had some we went through some rings on a planet with a
Oh yeah.
space chase with spaceships. Man, you got me. I love those things.
Yeah.
Some of those action scenes were great. Yeah, so some I all right, we'll get to what we don't like. I mean, anything else out there we liked and wanted to really lean into and make sure we share that we liked about the show.
I'll second John again with Soul. He was one of my favorite characters here, and I thought that under different writers, he would have shined a lot better. And instead of us supposedly trying to see him as the bad guy for this evil space witch and turning into this demonic shadow figure, and I'm supposed to feel bad when she dies, and he's supposed to be in the wrong for something like that. I think
Yeah.
in a better show that would have been handled much better. But like his whole thing of the guilty experiences of not even being able to train the girl that he tried to protect because she washes out of the Jedi's rigid system of how things are supposed to work, and kind of, as John has mentioned, he's a very Qui-Gon figure in that area. But unfortunately, he just doesn't have like the charisma and the aptitude that Qui-Gon did to get away with some of that stuff. So yeah, I enjoyed Soul a lot.
Cool. Some things you didn't quite like or didn't quite work. I hate to end on a negative. We'll talk about State of the Union, things we hope for. We'll be hopeful here at the end. We'll bring a new hope to all this. That's where it started. We'll be hopeful. But some things that didn't quite work or things you didn't like. Christian, we'll start with you.
The cult, the coven, they want us to call them the coven. They're a cult, and I have no sympathy whatsoever for them. They just act like they're morally superior to everyone without any evidence backing that up. Other than the whole, I like the idea of them like bringing life back, but what is the cost of that? And I think if this were a competent show, it would show that them bringing back life caused death elsewhere because they're misusing creative forces for that. But I think we're supposed to see them as the good guys who were just unjustly slain by Jedi. So I'm also against that idea. the timeline issues thing, like this should be Darth Tenebris and not Darth Plagueis. If anything, Darth Plagueis should have been the Acolyte for this series, which would have been better for me if we
Yeah.
had done that. Even though our brief little cameo of him was cool, would just kind of break continuity again. But then again, this is new canon, so they can do their stuff. Yeah, whenever Soul, Ocean May, I really don't care about them. I wanted to so desperately, but they gave me so little. I wanted nothing to do with what they had with them. Hating on the Jedi, we did. Yeah, I'm going to stop before I say too much more because I know we have other places to be tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. John, how about you? What's some things that didn't quite work or things you were a little disappointed in?
I was kind of disappointed with the Jedi deaths in the beginning. Like, I mean, she's going around like lopping these Jedi off, like they had no idea how to fight, and the one committed suicide. And again, kind of going off of what Christian said, it was like they were kind of justified in what they did, and they did cover up what happened, but I mean, did they really have to? I mean, the writing wasn't so competent, and it was like I just didn't understand how they died so meaninglessly and stuff like that. I don't know. I'm trying to think of some other things I didn't like. I didn't feel sympathy for the Coven at all either. I'm just like, oh god, I mean, they tried to make the mother be out to be like a loving mother, and I kind of liked her, but it was still at the same time, they were a coven of witches misusing the Force to create life and dabbling in things that they shouldn't have, and I don't know. The storyline was a little bit of a mess with Osha and May, and I mean, I actually liked in the beginning. Pretty much the first 2 episodes were great setups that just didn't get followed up on enough. Where May was like the bad one and Osha was the good one, and they had kind of a good conflict between each other, and that just did not get realized at the end at all. Like instead, they did a flip flop, and it was kind of a cop out. Instead of having them kind of resolve their issues, a duel between the 2 of them would have been fabulous at the end.
Why didn't I think of that? That's a brilliant idea.
That's how it should have ended.
They had a little bit of a kung fu fight where they're matching each other's kind of fighting skills, but in terms of like with the lightsaber and what's going on, I thought they're going to kind of merge into one person at the end because they kept talking about how they're the same person. I thought they were going to merge into one person or some kind of like they both go up into smoke and then they come together as one, become one kind of yin and yang dyad between themselves, and then that's the Acolyte with thing. I would have seen a little bit more of that. Would have been cool. But yeah, I think it went down one road, then kind of switched, and then it switched another way and kind of switched back. And yeah, some of that, you try to do a lot in one particular episode, but yeah, I will say that like that little badger basil / tracker dude, what in the world were you doing, dude? Like I found him annoying every time he hopped on. It was cute at first. I'm like, cool. I'm all cool about a cool alien dog-like pet in Star Wars that's going to help you. And then I didn't quite understand his motivation or what was going on. He was just a little snitch, man. And like, and then like Crash Soul's playing. I'm like, what are we doing with this thing? So he fell flat. I was like, come on, I'm not buying that action figure or plush doll at Disney Star Wars World. But and then the skinny dipping, I was like, what are we doing? You could have done a different way. And I, I'm not a prude. I watch Game of Thrones. I watch House of the Dragon. I like that stuff. But I'm just saying, there's a different way to show vulnerability and to turn your back and then like lure her to the dark side of the Force rather than like this kind of like Twilight-esque romance between this guy and the other. I was like, what are we doing, folks? And then I will say them doing soil samples and metal detector, I didn't quite understand that. You should be Force users that can use your Force abilities to connect with the Force around you and to get closer to it. You understand what's going on, make you more powerful rather than just taking soil samples on a planet. I'm with Tobin. I was like, what are we? I want to go home. And then some of the talking with a friend of the pod, Nick, on Facebook a little bit. Some of the Jedi and High Republic Jedi just felt kind of stiff and wooden. Not a lot of personality there, and a lot of not that I want to get behind. And I feel like that's kind of my my complaint about the High Republic as a whole is just kind of wooden, not a lot of personality, not a lot of characters. I can't wait to find out what's going to happen next too. So that's kind of where I am when it comes to all that. So let's we're going to move a little bit into more of the negative State of the Union, and but also kind of lean into what we're hopeful for. So here we go. All right, State of the Union for Star Wars and what's next. John, how are you feeling about Star Wars right now? And what do you hope for? What's going to be next?
Well, I'd say Star Wars in the fandom as a whole, it's pretty divisive, and I feel like it's because there's a lack of respect for not just canon, but for the fans themselves and at large, especially the older fans, and it's kind of generational dissonance in action. Where the current generation is judging the past generation based on their current morals, because current morals are always superior to past morals. And it kind of bleeds into the show where they disrespect the Jedi a little, with basically they're all carbon copies of each other. They don't have much of a personality. They're like corrupt cops. They're kind of space cops. They don't have any passion for the Force, it seems like nobody's like sitting meditating, trying to experience the Force or like kind of like do the religious side. Like that's why Star Wars Rebels was so successful, and also Luke Skywalker and everybody, they always seem to be kind of more like the Buddhist monk, kind of like the Avatar, where their spiritual side of things is very strong, and that's what is the strongest part of the show, is when they start getting spiritual. And that's why when Qui-Gon came back from the Force in the Clone Wars, like that was a huge deal, and Yoda went on this spiritual journey to meet the Wills. That was really important in some of the best parts of the Clone Wars show. And they didn't do any type of spirituality. They basically just left the religion out of Star Wars and turned them into space cops, and corrupt space cops at that, with no personalities. And they tried to cover up one of their, cover up all a bunch of stuff. And it's like, just didn't do it for me. And I feel like as the Star Wars as a whole, I feel like this generation just doesn't know how to be respectful to the previous generation, and it shows. And the writing isn't as good. I mean, even the original trilogy was really hokey in some points. I mean, it's campy. It's like a 70s sci-fi flick, but it felt genuine. It didn't feel like it was trying to push a bunch of political motives. And I feel like this is not going to unite the Star Wars universe anymore. It's going to create a little bit more division. I don't agree with all the review bombing, where some people were review bombing the wrong movie because they just didn't know how to type in the right one. And but my hope for the future is that, like with Dave Filoni and some other people getting a little bit more power away from the political people, I feel like I do have hope that they will connect the Star Wars universe a little bit better. We got the Mando and Grogu movie coming. We've got the Thrawn, the Threat of Thrawn, Ahsoka Season 2. And I feel like it's kind of all building up, because I feel like Luke Skywalker, Leia. I'd really love to see Billy Lord come back as Leia. That's I feel like the best choice. It would be amazing. But I feel like we have some good things coming in the Star Wars universe, and I don't think it's going to be related to the Acolyte.
There you go. Christian, State of the Union. What's next? What do you hope for?
We've got Skeleton Crew coming up, which is its own thing. It sounds like it's going to be just a more, not a kid show, but for a younger audience of exploring a part of the galaxy where they don't really know what's going on there. It might even tie into Ahsoka Season 2. Maybe that's how they come back. We've got the Mandalorian Grogu movie. That's been like the best thing Disney has done outside of Andor Season 2, which is coming up as well. Andor Season 1 is fantastic Star Wars. Not a single lightsaber got lit. And yet I was having the time of my life watching it. So I'm looking forward to Season 2. And that was something I didn't want. When they announced it, it's like, why would I ever want this? And now it's like, well, why wouldn't I want this? Because they actually had good writing, great actors, great sets, and everything, as opposed to some other things I could mention. So I am hopeful about other things. I am not as hopeful about this particular series if we get a Season 2, especially since the way Hollywood is working right now. At best, we'd get a new season in 2 or 3 years, which really kind of kills my interest for more of this story.
Yeah, I would say that I wasn't really interested in season 2 of this until I saw the finale, and they did enough there at the end that I'm like, okay, I'm ready for it. Whether that's going to happen or not, I'm not quite sure. I kind of judge as a series to talk about, like, is it rewatchable? Will I go back and watch this? There are moments I may go back and rewatch this. I did not have any desire to go back and watch Obi-Wan or Book of Boba Fett. There's definitely Mandalorian seasons that I want to see. Ahsoka, maybe. So definitely some of the movies I go back and watch. Andor, I will watch Andor season 1 before season 2. So there's some cool things coming up. There's a lot of Star Wars out there, and so I'm hoping Star Wars isn't going anywhere. But I do think that there is a problem of distrust with the fan base, review bombing. There's some stuff going on out there that we need either kind of search our own feelings and attachments about what we want, what we don't want, and have the people. I trust Filoni. I trust others to say, like, just tell a good Star Wars story, and the other stuff will fall into place. Other stuff will fall into place. So I talked about Rebel Force Radio, and I love that podcast. I think they did a great job in their discourse and talking about Star Wars. I did a poll on their Facebook page. They have like 3,000 followers on that, and I said, what are your thoughts for the finale? Without like the review bombing, and are you excited? Do you just want to see Star Wars? You can't wait to get this over. You don't like it. You're not going to watch it. And I think about, like, over 60% on that poll were hopeful and wanted to see finale, wanted to see it ended well, and we're excited about it and want to see more Star Wars. The others were kind of not really. So I think that's kind of where the fan base is. Kind of 60% of fan base are like, yeah, we want this to succeed. I'm a part of that. I want the Star Wars to succeed. The other, like, skeptical, distrust, are going to turn their nose up, like to hate watch and those kind of things. So I think in terms of our nation and where we are with how we do public discourse and politics and fandom online, is pretty toxic. And I think we can do a better job. And that's what we want to do at Systematic Ecology, is do a little bit better job, healthier. Not that we can't be critical or say we don't like things, but we want to just have a little bit healthier conversation when it comes to these things. Guys, anything else before we sign off? Are there some things there you want to get off your chest about Star Wars or about this show, or what you hope the future of Star Wars will be?
I hope it gets better because I don't want to not like Star Wars.
Right. Yep. John, how about you, buddy?
I was going to say, you got to get back to the roots of the Jedi, and, bring in the fact that they are kind of a spiritual, being, that what makes them set apart from everybody else is their connection to the Force. And if you don't do any focus at all, or you don't show a lot of how they connect with the Force, then it just doesn't have anything special to me. And that's what kind of unites all of us, really. We really enjoy those spiritual moments in all of the Star Wars shows. Those are the best moments, because that's, kind of like them ascending and, or becoming more powerful when they sit down, they focus, and they let go of themselves, and they become almost like a Buddhist monk, and then they have powers. It's necessary, and they didn't do a good job of that at all in the Acolyte.
Right. I hear you. That's it. I think, yeah. I was telling, off air a little bit, Christian, that I went to my local comic book store today and asked if any of them had seen the finale of The Acolyte, and all the workers in the comic store said no. And I was like, wow, we've come a long way from this hub of geek culture not being that interested. They're like, we'll see the movies. We're kind of, disappointed in the fan base, and there's so much going on. We don't know where this fits in the timeline, and we don't have an interest. There's other things we want to put our geek attention to. And I was like, wow, this is a big, Star Wars on episodic Star Wars on the screen. The people in my comic store aren't that interested in. And and those are the workers. Those are the ones I had their fingers on the pulse of geek culture. And so I'm, there's something that Star Wars, Disney / Kathleen Kennedy, whatever, need to do to help the fan base and heal a little bit. We'll see if that happens. Filoni, I trust. Favreau, I trust. We'll see down the road what will happen. Hey, fans, friends, listeners, Star Wars fans, what do you think? search your feelings, discern your attachments, connect with us. Let us know what you thought about this show. Is there anything we missed? Any themes? I'm sure we did. But let us know. What are you connected? What are you hopeful for? What were you disappointed in? But then how can we be a community together of forces of light and good in the universe to be with each other? And thanks for being a part of Systematic Geekology, a part of geek culture and the conversation we have going on. We couldn't thank you enough. And John, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to let you sign us off with whatever you want to sign us off. You could say the force be with you. You could say Joshua's thing, my thing, Christian's thing. We're going to let you sign us off to this particular episode because, yep, there's no more. We need more light and good in the universe.
I'm probably going to fail at this, but anyway, thank you guys for joining us today. May the force be with all of you. And I got nothing else.
Yeah, that works. Yay, I love it. Thanks, John. I'll put you on the spot. I didn't put that on the script. But yeah, the force be with you always.